What does the mechanics of the modern pit stop consist of? From the incredibly well-coordinated actions of the entire brigade, every tenth of a second really matters. As you can see, the fastest and most error-free work in the pit lane is one of the key success factors in the race. Even a small misfire can lead to the loss of precious seconds. In Formula 1, a successful pit stop requires more than good equipment and discipline. It also requires a phenomenal level of skill and the ability to work under hard pressure. A pit stop is also an element of well-coordinated teamwork, comparable to a careful, rehearsed dance, in which the team in the pit lane must act in harmony with each other and bring all movements to automatism. Now, during the pit stop, the main thing is to change tires. There are cases of changing the front wing, remove debris from side pods, clear air route in the radiators, swap a steering wheel if there is an electrical issue, or quick repair of elements with adhesive tape. The team informs the driver on the radio that he needs to go into the pits. The driver confirms this and, instead of the starting line, turns towards the pit lane. At this time, the team mechanics take out sets of tires from the heaters, which they will install in the car. Then they take their clearly marked places in the front of the team's garage. The driver approaching the pit lane slows down before the line marking the beginning of the pit lane and turns on the speed limiter. Usually it's either 16 or 18 km per hour. It's very important to slow down exactly at the end of the road leading to the pit lane, because you can go to any speed up to this line. We even saw overtaking in such places. But if you exceed the speed limit after the line, you can get a fine. Then the driver drives along the pit lane and sees the mechanics of his team, after which he starts turning as early as possible in order to take a convenient trajectory and brake comfortably, approaching the mechanics. To do this, the mechanics of other teams move their guns as far as possible from passing cars so as not to interfere with other teams to make a pit stop. Although, to be honest, they have the right not to do this. At the end of 2021, the year Mercedes and Red Bull fought for the championship of their races, they not only stopped putting the guns away, but also began to deliberately put the mechanic on the corners, so that it would become inconvenient for rival drivers to drive into the boxes of their team. The driver turns the brakes at a certain point. Yeah, they train in practice during free practice session as well as in qualifying, which is not as simple as it seems, because the pit lane is poorly rubberized. There can be a lot of different debris on it, and the road surface may also differ from the main track. Moreover, the rider drives slowly, which deprives him of a lot of downforce. The pits are different, it all depends on the track coverage and the distance of pits from the team's garage. By the way, the pits are the place where the pit stop takes place in front of the team's garage. The first box has the best in triangle, but it can be difficult to get out of it. The team places the boxes at different angles, somewhere at large angles, somewhere completely parallel to the pit lane, in order to lose as little time as possible on the exit and entrance of driver. Moreover, it's quite difficult to move from a place after a pit stop. For example, when it rains, the team tries to remove water with mops from the place where the cars are serviced. Teams also mark the tarmac ahead of the race to mark where they will pit and conduct about 50 practice pit stops during the race weekend, with and without drivers, by simply rolling the car. Let's get back to what's going on. We settle on the fact that the rider turns as early as possible in order to catch the trajectory between the mechanics and focus on the points where he needs to stop. Depending on the team, about this place can 2 arrows or 1, indicating exactly the place where the driver should stand with the front wheels. And missing a few inches can cost you a lot of pit stop time. I'll explain why a little bit later. As soon as the driver has parked, this arrow is removed. Once in the box, the rider puts the car into neutral, steps on the brake and holds the steering wheel tight to prevent the front axle from moving while changing wheels. Now, let's look at those who are waiting for the racers in the pits. The first thing to do is to raise the car. For this, there is a front jackman and rear jackman. The front one immediately expects the car in position, and this is exactly the person who is the main danger if the driver doesn't have time to slow down in time. The rear jackman immediately begins to move behind the car. These mechanics raise the car in one motion, and the front mechanic immediately steps aside. since the pivoting jack mechanism allows it to do so. This is all to get out of the rider's way as quickly as possible by hydraulically lowering the car and pulling the jack. And that half-second saving is worth more than $250,000, the cost of a jack. There are spares behind the two jackmen in case something happens to the main ones. Simultaneously with the jack, the main action of changing tires is carried out by 4 groups of mechanics, 3 people for each wheel. Let's analyze their action on the example of one group. The mechanic closest to the approaching car stands and holds the new wheel. The second mechanic sits on his knees with a gun, and as soon as the car approaches, he kind of aims at the wheel and leads the gun up to the place where he will need to use it. This mechanic, like a hunter, aims at the nut. Due to this, when the car is still stopping, the mechanic is already putting a gun on the nut that needs to be unscrewed. And a few tenths of a second before the jacks raise the car, you can already hear the sound of the work of guns unscrewing the nuts. At the same time, the third mechanic begins to hold this wheel in order to remove it as soon as the car leaves the ground and put it to the side. Simultaneously with it, the second mechanic removes the gun on himself, which automatically switches from the loosen mode to the tightening mode. And the first mechanic installs a new wheel. The gunman takes aim at the nut again before the wheel is in place. Then he screws on. It's worth paying attention to how precise and all movements are and how small the distance between the gun and the wheels are, only a few centimeters. When replacing them, any touch can double the length of the pit stop, given that a perfect pit stop takes 2 seconds. The foot of the third mechanic generally stands in the way of the car in order to have the most convenient access to the wheel. It's for this reason that it is imperative for the driver to stop at clearly marked places so that the team doesn't have to move, especially the mechanic with the gun. After all, he sits on his knees, and any movement will lead to the loss of a huge amount of time, as well as possible contacts between mechanics. He sits in a comfortable position and must be in good physical condition because he doesn't work with a conventional impact driver. Guns for teams are supplied by the Italian company Dina Paoli. It gives out more than 10,000 revolutions and 3,000 Newton meters. It runs on compressed air and electricity connected to the team's unified pit-stop system. Each gunman has a spare gun lying behind him. However, it's not only guns that help quickly change tires. The special mounting design allows you to quickly unscrew and spin the wheel. Wheel nuts in F1 have come a long way in the last 15 to 20 years. Until refueling was cancelled in 2010, nuts were simple, as having a long refueling gave enough time to change all 4 tires, which took 4 to 5 seconds. In order to speed up pit stops after the ban on refueling, the nut has ceased to have a classic hexagonal look and has become an aluminum polyhedral nut, which allows you to install a gun on the nut with accuracy and reduce the chance of miss to a minimum. To tighten such a nut, only 3 turns are required. Of course, all these attributes together help to change wheels as quickly as possible. At some point, the teams decided to use nuts to vent the brake system. That's why nuts got bigger and bigger. The modern wheel nut has a diameter of more than 90 mm and is the part of the wheel in the center of the disc. If during the installation of the wheel the nut is damaged, then the entire wheel becomes unusable. On the axle on which the wheel with the nut is put on, there is a protruding spring-loaded device that acts as a spare lock. It rejects when the wheel is installed and pops out when the wheel is secured, preventing it from coming off if the nut is loose. Of course, they won't help to continue the race, but they will be enough to safely stop the car with the broken mount. In addition to the main participants of the pit stop, we have others. For example, 2 mechanics who stabilize the car in the center to prevent wobble. It occurs due to the fact that the car relies on just 2 small jacks. In addition, these mechanics can remove debris from the air intakes of the side pontoons. There are also 2 additional mechanics at the front that either change the front wing or clean it of debris that can get caught on the track. Also, these mechanics can adjust the front wing with special elements. This is often done when the weather conditions on the track change and you need to add downforce on front or rear. Another additional mechanic might be someone who cleans the rear wing or makes minor repairs with duct tape. Yeah, hammers aren't used here, as in NASCAR. Another mechanic stands ready with a fire extinguisher. In addition to all these mechanics, there is one or two spotters that control when the driver can leave the box. Behind is a spotter that controls the safe release of the car. Since according to the rules, if there is another car in parallel, that is forbidden to leave, and you must first let the opponent through. And the same mechanic stands in the front. He is also known as a lollipop man. Besides, where it is possible to show a green traffic light to the driver, he must make sure that all mechanics have finished the work and the release of the car won't interfere with the rivals. After which, the mechanic gives permission to leave. This is how a Formula 1 pit stop works. The big change that slowed down pit stops came in 2021, when automatic sensors were banned, which some teams installed directly on guns. And in automatic mode, they send signals to the traffic lights that the wheel was screwed on and the car could be let out. What's more, some jacks automatically lowered the car to save time. In some teams, the mechanics tried to send the signal that the wheel was bolted on as early as it possible, even while they were still bolting it on. Currently, all sensors in guns signal to mechanics that the wheel is bolted on, and only after that mechanics can press the button on the guns that reports that the wheel is bolted. That will make it possible to send a signal to lower the car from the jacks. After the introduction of this rule, it often happens that the mechanic pressed the button before the sensor gave its signal to complete the work, and the system didn't record the pressing of the mechanic's button. Due to the huge tension on the pit stop, the mechanics didn't immediately understand what was happening and lost time before pressing the button again. In addition, 0.1 seconds must now elapse after all mechanics give signals for the driver to be allowed to leave. Previously, it wasn't formally fixed what exactly happens on the pit stop, and the FIA introduced these rules by slowing down the pit stops.